The Republican Party is dead. Conservatism is dead. And America, well, it died 4 years ago. We begin with Charles Krauthammer, who argues today in his syndicated column that in 2016, facts, logic, and history have ceased to matter. Virtually the entire American electorate and the entire American population is living in a dream world, scarcely less ubiquitous than the Matrix itself. Or as Dr. K phrases it, the suspension of disbelief among voters has become ubiquitous. And now, fewer than 6 weeks from the election, what is the main event of the day? A fight between the GOP presidential nominee, GOP in quotes, and a former Miss Universe whom he had 20 years ago called Miss Piggy and other choice pejoratives. Just a few weeks earlier, we were seized by a transient hysteria over a minor Hillary Clinton lung infection hyped to near mortal status. The latest curiosity is Donald Trump's 37 sniffles during the first presidential debate. Well, you saw it in an earlier video. People do count this sort of thing. Dr. Howard Dean has suggested a possible cocaine addiction. For Trump, I guess. In a man who claims not to even drink coffee, this campaign is sinking to somewhere between zany and totally insane. Is there a bottom? All up together now, folks. No, there's not! This is what you get with two tabloid candidates. This is what you get with an American electorate that is so decadent that they don't care about being led. All they care about, or inspired, all they care about is being entertained. Take the most striking and overlooked moment of Trump's GOP convention speech. He actually promised that under him, the crime and violence that today afflicts our nation will soon, and I mean very soon, come to an end. Not be reduced, end. No more crime. The lions will lay down with the lambs. He will wipe away every tear, a chicken in every pot, a Big Mac in every stomach, and eat all the Haagen-Dazs you want, and you won't get a big fat ass, right? Nothing messianic about that promise, now is there? Humanity has been at this since, Adam, Cain and Abel at least. But the audience didn't laugh, as they should have. They applauded. They cheered. Wildly. Nor was this mere spur-of-the-moment hyperbole. Trump is reading from a teleprompter. You would think that this was one of Trump's trademark streams of consciousness, just saying whatever comes to mind, Trump being Trump. No, that was on the teleprompter. He didn't go off script until later in the speech, if you will recall. As he was a few weeks earlier when he told a conference in North Dakota, politicians have used you and stolen your votes. They have given you nothing. I will give you everything? Everything, mind you. I will give you what you've been looking for 50 years. None of them laughed. They all cheered and applauded wildly. And then they bowed down and worshipped him. In launching his African American outreach at a speech in Charlotte, Trump cataloged the horrors that he believes define black life in America today, then promised, "I will fix it." Just like that. The first black president for 8 years hasn't been able to fix anything. But Cheeto Jesus will. How primitive have our politics become? Fix what? Family structure? Social inheritance? Self-destructive habits? How? He doesn't say. He'll will it, I guess. Wave his magic putter. Trust him, as he likes to say. Nothing messianic about that, is there? After 15 months, the suspension of disbelief has become so ubiquitous that we hardly notice it anymore. We are operating in an alternate universe where the geometry is non-Euclidean. Facts don't matter, history and logic have disappeared, or simply been killed stone cold dead. Going into the first debate, Trump was in a virtual tie for the lead. If I say virtual, it was within a point or two. Now it's back to 3 in Hillary's favor. The bar for him was set almost comically low. He had merely to 1, suffer no major meltdown, and 2, produce just a few moments of coherence. And even then, Hillary might just keel over, face down on the table, or the rostrum, or whatever. Podium. Yeah, there. That'll work. Well, and he cleared the bar for maybe the first 15 minutes or so, in which he established the entire premise of his campaign. Things suck, and she's been around for 30 years. You like bad? Stick with her. You want change? I'm your man. Change to what? Since he doesn't stand for anything markedly different than she does. He didn't explain that either. Can't get more elemental than that. At one point, Mrs. Clinton laughed and ridiculed Trump for trying to blame her for everything that's ever happened. In fact, that's exactly what he did. By conventional measures, poise, logic, command of the facts, she won the debate handily. But when it comes to moving the needle, conventional measures don't apply this year, except now, because it has moved the needle in her favor. Not hugely, but enough. What might, however, move the needle is not the debate itself, but the time bomb Trump left behind. His great weakness, as we've discussed in the preceding 2 videos, is his vanity. He is temperamentally incapable of allowing any attack on his person to go unavenged. He is particularly sensitive on the subject of his wealth, which he has much less of, evidently, than he wants people to believe. So central to his self-image is his business acumen, which sucks. 4 bankruptcies more than demonstrate that in the debate he could not resist the temptation to tout his cleverness on taxes, and he will not release any of his tax returns. To an audience of 84 or 86, whichever, million people, he appeared to concede that he didn't pay any. "That makes me smart," he smugly interjected, or it makes him a tax evader. And he still won't release his returns. That was a big mistake. It's almost as if he was saying, "Yeah, I am a robber baron. Yeah, I am a crook. Yes, I am the epitome of everything the left has ever accused conservatives of being." Or, in other words, the raison d'etre of his entire campaign. Discrediting and destroying conservatism forever. Next day, on Tuesday, Mrs. Clinton offered the obvious retort. If not paying taxes makes him smart, what does that make all the rest of us? Well, if Mrs. Clinton paid taxes either. Meanwhile, Trump has been going around telling Rust Belt workers, on whom his electoral college strategy hinges, and it's not working, and who might still believe that billionaires do have some obligation to pay taxes, that, quote, I am your voice. And Trumplicans accuse never-Trumpers of having a tin ear. When gaffes like this are committed, the candidate either doubles down, you might say that if you can legally pay nothing, why not, given how corrupt the tax code is, or simply denies he ever said anything of the sort. Indeed, one of the more remarkable features of this campaign is how brazenly candidates deny having said things that have been captured on tape. YouTube, anyone? Such as Mrs. Clinton denying she ever said the Trans-Pacific Partnership was the gold standard of trade deals. The only thing more amazing is how easily they get away with it. Tribalism, anyone? Now we turn to the dean of conservative columnists in 2016, George Will, the bow-tied one, who states the self-evident fact. Donald Trump's rise reflects America's decay. If Trump wins, the Republican Party will no longer be the party of conservatism. Of course, Trump's not going to win. He seems to be doing everything in his power to tank the election, much to Trumplicans' eventual dismay. I wonder what will happen when enough Trumplicans realize what Trump is doing, or realize after the fact what Trump did, and how he just tanked it. He just threw it away, every chance that he had to defeat Hillary Clinton, save them from Hillary Clinton, and he threw it all away. I wonder, will they feel a sense of betrayal, and will they be pissed at Trump, or will they continue to live in the land of make-believe? Well, regardless, this is the worst-case scenario, Trump winning. Because I said it before, I'll say it again. If Hillary wins, the opportunity will be there for the right to reunite in opposition against Mrs. Clinton. But if Trump wins, a lot of the right is going to feel obligated to defend Trump and his left-wing agenda and all his scandals, and it'll be the Nixon effect all over again. I don't know about y'all, but I'd much prefer the first option, since there really isn't any functional difference between the two. Now, looking on the bright side, perhaps this election can teach conservatives to look on the dark side. They need a talent for pessimism, recognizing the signs that whatever remains of American exceptionalism does not immunize this nation from decay to which all regimes are susceptible. The world's oldest political party is an exhausted volcano. That would be the Democrats. The intellectual staleness of its recycled candidate unchallenged because a generation of younger Democrat leaders barely exists. The Republican Party's candidate evidently disdains his credulous supporters who continue to swallow his mendacities. About 90% of presidential votes will be cast for Hillary Clinton or Donald Trump, refuting the theory that this is a center-right country. At the risk of taking Trump's words more seriously than he does, and on some matters he is to Clinton's left regarding big government powered by an unbridled presidency. His trade policy is liberalism's industrial policy, repackaged for faux conservatives comfortable with presidents dictating what America can import and purchase at what prices, and where U.S. corporations can operate. Trump wouldn't approve Ford manufacturing cars in Mexico. He would create a federal police force to deport 450,000 illegal aliens a month, including 6.4% of America's workforce in 2 years. Barring any other arguments, that's logistically impossible. All right? Say nothing of politically impossible. Yet the 25 million jobs he promises to create would require more than doubling the current rate of legal immigration to fill them, according to economist Mark Zandi. Remember that Planned Parenthood-induced, aided and abetted drop in the domestic birth rate? The Supreme Court's 2005 Kelo decision, diluting property rights by vastly expanding the government's powers of eminent domain, Trump says, I happen to agree with it 100%. Even Bernie Sanders rejects Kelo. When Trump says people are not making it on Social Security, he implies that people should be able to make it on Social Security for a third or more of their lives, and that he, like Mrs. Clinton, is for enriching this entitlement's benefits. He will save the system by eliminating, wait for it, waste, fraud, and abuse. Really? Trump is parsimonious, naturally, with specifics regarding health care. Plans you don't even know about will be devised because we're going to come up with plans, healthcare plans that will be so good. Trumplicans, he is practically grabbing you by the throat and telling you, I'm swindling you! Stop being idiots. Oh, and as to regarding foreign policy, he would get China and he would say, get in North Korea and straighten it out. He's going to force the Chi-Coms to straighten out North Korea. Whatever he means by that. Charismatic authority, wrote Max Weber in 1915, 7 years before Mussolini's march on Rome, causes the governed to submit because of their belief in the extraordinary quality of the specific person. Sieg Heil! Ah, that's right, I said it, and did it. Charismatic rule thus rests upon the belief in magical powers, revelations, and hero worship. Read idolatry. Read the exact same BS under which we've been languishing for the past 8 years. A demagogue's success requires a receptive demos, and Trump's ascendancy reflects progressivism's success in changing America's social norms and national character by destigmatizing dependency. Under a Trumpetancy, Trump says, government will have all the answers. I am your voice. I alone can fix it? The pronoun has unlimited antecedents. I will give you everything. I will give you what you've been looking for 50 years. I'm the only one. Sieg Heil. Or if you prefer the Marvel version, Hail Hydra! Urban without a trace of urbanity, maybe he meant urbane, Trump has surrounded himself with star-struck acolytes Mike Cuck Pence marvels at Trump's anatomical broad-shouldered foreign policy. You thought I was going to say erect, didn't you? Oh, and hysterics. Rudy Giuliani. There's no next election. This is it! When Ferdinand VII regained Spain's throne in 1813, he vowed to end the disastrous mania of thinking. Yes, because, all that rugged individualism, all that thinking for ourselves, well, Trump's going to do away with that. And apparently nearly half of Republicans are just fine with it. Actually, more like 90% of Republicans, or, well, 80%, I guess. Trump, by the way, is America's Ferdinand. The American project was to construct a constitutional regime whose institutional architecture would guarantee the limited government implied by the founders' philosophy. Government is instituted to secure pre-existing natural rights. Today, however, God-given in other words, neither the executive nor legislative branches takes this seriously. The judiciary has forsworn enforcing it, and that isn't even a constitutional power of theirs anyway. You won't find it anywhere in Article 3. And neither political party represents it because no substantial constituency supports it any longer. Yeah, how's that restoring the republic business going, Mr. Gibbs? The ease with which Trump has erased Republican conservatism matches the speed with which Republican leaders have normalized him. Remember, Trumplicans, how I told you, you are now on the same side as the GOP establishment? How's it feel? For the formerly conservative party, the founders' principles, although platitudes in the party's catechism, have become, as Daniel Patrick Moynihan said, a kind of civic religion, avowed but not constraining. The beginning of conservative wisdom is recognition that there is an end to everything. Nothing lasts. Entropy, second law of thermodynamics. The curse of sin. If Trump wins, which he won't, but if he were to win, the GOP would end as a vehicle for conservatism. And a political idea without a political party is an orphan in a cruel and indifferent world. Pessimism need not breed fatalism or passivity, however. It can define an agenda of regeneration, but only by being clear-eyed about the extent of degeneration, which a charlatan's successful selling of his fabulousness exemplifies. Conservatism's recovery from his piratical capture of the Conservative Party will require facing unflattering facts about a country that is currently indifferent, utterly indifferent to its founding. Jim Garrity, in his Morning Jolt newsletter this morning, is constrained and forced to concur with Mr. Will. A lot of Americans have forgotten our founding values, or never learned them in the first place, and a lot more believe in them only conditionally for their side. Tribalism, anybody? Quite a few Americans believe in freedom of speech so long as they agree with that speech. They accept, create, and enforce free speech zones on college campi, seek to punish people for speech that is offensive to them, seek to get people fired for expressing views outside the workplace, want their own definition of hate speech to be prosecuted as a crime and agitate for the suspension of others from social media. Remember, it seems like most of my lifetime ago, when the saying was, I may disagree with what you say, but I will defend to the death your right to say it. Good times, good times. A lot of Americans' belief in religious liberty is wavering at best, exhibiting an increasingly less subtle hostility to people who believe differently from them. In other words, in the age of tolerance, everybody's becoming intolerant. A lot of Americans' belief in the rule of law is highly conditional upon whether the accused is someone they like and agree with or not. If the target of an investigation is a partisan ally, the investigation is illegitimate, a witch hunt that deserves obstruction at every turn. If the target is a partisan foe, they have it coming. The law needs to make an example in this case to send a message to all our other enemies. The law may as well not apply to some of those who enter illegally. Cities may declare they are sanctuaries who refuse to enforce a law they disagree with or cooperate with other authorities. But a Texas governor who offended the left can be prosecuted under the contention that his use of a veto represented an abuse of power, which it didn't. It was a constitutional power. He's referring to Rick Perry, of course. It was a constitutional power that Rick Perry had, and he used it. But he used it in playing some legal hardball against the Democrats in Texas, and Democrats did what they always do. They tried to use the law as a partisan cudgel, truncheon, weapon, hammer. Paramilitary raids of citizens' homes are launched under the thin claim that they were illegally coordinating issue advocacy. Nothing illegal about it. Perfectly legal, in fact. That would be the John Doe Inquisition of Democrats against Scott Walker in Wisconsin, which was motivated purely by partisan revenge. Secondly, there are plenty of conservatives who have worked for actual solutions in the context of political diversity and actually achieved them. A bunch of them ran for president. The aforementioned Governor Scott Walker, the aforementioned former Governor Rick Perry, former Louisiana Governor Bobby Jindal. They were also among the first effectively rejected by the Republican presidential selection process, because they weren't entertaining enough. That process does not really begin with the Iowa caucus. It begins with donors, both large and small, with media coverage, with conservative organizations, and with the interest of grassroots activists. All of these candidates had websites. All of these candidates got at least some coverage. Interviews and profiles and discussions of their records and ideas were just a Google search away. But most Republican primary voters didn't really want to know that much. They just wanted to be entertained. A large chunk of the Republican Party can no longer be bothered to pay attention to conservatives who work for actual solutions in the context of political diversity. That's boring. Scott Walker revolutionized the role of public sector unions in state government. Rick Perry governed over a statewide economic boom that created millions of jobs, while the rest of the country was languishing in a depression. Sorry. Excuse me. Where was I? Bobby Jindal took a corrupt, despairing, economically wrecked post-Katrina state and turned it into the greatest state turnaround of the decade. Oh, ain't done yet. No, Republicans didn't want any of that. They didn't want actual solutions. They didn't want hard work. They didn't want, well, to have to get off their couches and do anything themselves. No, they just wanted their own Obama. They wanted their own savior. They wanted Chino Jesus. And now they're going to get him. They already do have him in all his infamy. And so, is it all over? I mean, America, as a constitutional republic, died 4 years ago, Barack Obama's re-election. Now the Republican Party has embraced progressivism, given up, sold out, joined the primitives, joined the tribalists. If you can't beat them, join them. Well, as David French points out today at nationalreview.com, no nation can survive long without decent men and women at the helm. It appears none are left. At least none that this decadent, ignorant electorate wants in either party. The American Revolution was an exceedingly close affair, something that history doesn't emphasize nearly enough, and not just in its military outcome. The caliber of the leaders who emerged through the crucible of rebellion, combat, and ultimately fractious independence was always and ever in doubt. Remember, folks, in the backdrop of history, the American Revolution is the only revolution that didn't produce an even more brutal, vicious, and wicked dictatorship. That's what made it unique. The historical counterfactuals can be dizzying to contemplate. But it's a bit easier to imagine what would have happened if George Washington's army had been trapped on Manhattan than what would have happened if any of Washington's numerous detractors had succeeded in discrediting and replacing him. In other words, the halo effect of history makes it easy to forget that our founding generation was every bit as beset with vice as any other human generation. Washington constantly fought a two-front war, the deadly battle with the British and the political battle to stay in command of his own ranks. I'm currently reading Nathaniel Philbrick's excellent new Valiant Ambition, which traces the intertwined and ultimately diverging paths of George Washington and Benedict Arnold. And I've been struck not just by the multiplicity of the plots against Washington, but also by the staggering incompetence and corruption that brought a young nation to the brink of defeat. We were pulled back from that brink, not because the colonial elite as a class was better than its contemporary counterparts, but because its better members ultimately triumphed. By God's providence, in the perpetual war between virtue and vice, America has been blessed by numerous pivotal examples of the better man prevailing. I shudder to think of the nation that would have emerged if someone who gained power through sheer opportunism and betrayal had taken Washington's place. In other words, if the Donald Trump of the late 18th century had triumphed. What happens to a nation when the worst elements of the elite prevail? Such as Donald Trump or Hillary Clinton. Well, we're finding out now, folks. Though we live in an anti-establishment and anti-elite age, we do not suffer from a shortage of excellence. America's warriors are every bit as brave as they were in generations past. There still exist American politicians with true convictions and fine minds. We have diplomats who are capable of great feats of statesmanship. We have writers and thinkers who measure up to the best minds of years past. It's just none of those people are entertaining. And that's what decadent Americans want. Our contemporary elite as a class is not worse than the elites of ages past, but its worst members have triumphed at every level of government. And in even the facade of a constitutional representative republic, whose fault is that? Remember what Plato said in Beetle Bailey? In any kind of democracy, constitutional republic, what have you, the people get the kind of government they deserve. We live in a world where an aspiring liberal novelist shapes American foreign policy by sneering or with sneering condescension, throwing away hard-earned military victories without an ounce of regret. In cities such as Baltimore, ambitious prosecutors corrupt the rule of law to appease mobs and earn 15 minutes of ill-gotten fame. And now the people who compete to sit in the office that Washington himself indelibly shaped are among the most transparently opportunistic and self-centered people ever to obtain major party nominations. And somehow they're massively unpopular, and yet, how did they get nominated? Tribalism? Corruption? Evil? Now make no mistake, while a nation can drift along guided by such an elite for a time, it cannot do so indefinitely. Even the most virtuous citizenry can and will suffer greatly when its leaders lack character and talent, and this citizenry is far, far from virtuous. As voters, we have to delegate the extraordinarily complex tasks of governance to others. Negotiating effective trade deals requires a degree of expertise that is gained only through years of education and experience. In other words, government, the higher the office, the less of an entry-level job it is. One cannot merely pick up a rifle and lead men into battle because modern warfare requires an enormous amount of training. In short, we need an elite, and we need it to be excellent, not a dumpster fire. And perhaps there's the rub. At all levels of society, we are increasingly redefining excellence as the mere act of, ready for this? Does this sound familiar? Winning. And when we worship winning, we will see more of our most talented people tempted to abandon integrity for opportunism and corruption. Early in his command, George Washington was anything but a winner. He lost New York, and after rallying briefly in New Jersey, he went on to lose Philadelphia, then the nation's capital. Even going back to the French and Indian War, George Washington's record was far from perfect. But his defenders saw something in him beyond the immediate results on the battlefield. They saw the virtues that build an army and a nation. And Washington learned. He demonstrated courage. He modeled, and this is key, humility and grace. Two virtues among many that Donald Trump doesn't possess at all. Ultimately, Washington was so respected, even revered, that he could have ruled our new nation as long as he chose. But he did what modern winners never do. He yielded power. With words that the Broadway musical Hamilton have given new life. Quote, Though in reviewing the incidents of my administration I am unconscious of intentional error, I am nevertheless too sensible of my defects not to think it probable that I may have committed many errors. Can you picture Donald Trump ever saying those words? Whatever they may be, I fervently beseech the Almighty to avert or mitigate the evils to which they may tend. I shall also carry with me the hope of my country will never cease to view them with indulgence, and that after 45 years of my life dedicated to its service with an upright zeal, the faults of incompetent abilities will be consigned to oblivion, as myself must soon be to the mansions of rest. Men and women of that character still exist. They're just not popular. It's time for them to start to win, and for the winners to start to lose. Otherwise, we'll face a future where 2016 is not an aberration, but rather a harbinger, and the greatness of America becomes the stuff of history. America needs an elite. It's up to us to make sure its members are worthy of the nation they seek to lead. But unfortunately, those people are not popular. Those people have been cast out. And America is getting the government they deserve. One more addition to the right's eulogy before I put this video to bed. This one from Jonah Goldberg's weekly G-File electronic newsletter. Now, in his most selfish moments, Mr. Goldberg writes, he wants Donald Trump to win the election. I mean, Trump got to where he is for a lot of reasons, starting with the 17-candidate collective action problem, myriad failures of both the GOP's establishment and anti-establishment wings, and of course, the cold, indifferent cruelty of this meaningless, empty universe where nothing matters and the living envy the dead. But giving Trump his due, he also got to where he is because he was great at punching up. When he took on Jeb Bush, Reince Priebus, the media, Washington, etc., he was punching up. He wasn't just the outsider coming into town to blow things up. He was Godzilla smashing all before him. In the standard Godzilla movie, there's always that scene where the hapless Japanese army tries to lure the beast towards some electric power lines. Godzilla, or Godzilla, takes the bait and bites the power lines. But the shock doesn't kill him, it makes him stronger. That was Trump in the primaries. Mangling metaphors somewhat, people told him, you can't jump those power lines, those are the third rails of American politics. Trumpzilla cared not, bit them, and regrettably, tragically, got stronger. But here's the problem. Everyone thinks Godzilla is cool when he's fighting Monster Zero, aka King Ghidorah. Little monster movie trivia there. Or swatting away fighter jets. But when they have that close-up shot of Godzilla's clawed foot coming down on a child or a screaming woman, all of a sudden you can't cheer the king of monsters. So it is with Trump. He wins when he punches up. He loses when he punches down. And that is Trump's Achilles heel. He can't resist punching down. He can no more stop himself from counter-punching the little guy than my dog can agree not to chase rabbits. Now, everyone knows this. Hillary Clinton knew it, and she baited him. She almost literally could have said, Donald, I'm going to bait you. You would be a fool to take the bait. but I know you will. And he still would take the bait. In fact, I think he would be more likely to take the bait if she said she were baiting him, because he would want to prove that he could take the bait and still win. Now, I thought Trump lost the debate, but not overwhelmingly. He was clearly the winner of the first 15 minutes or so, and if he had stayed that guy for the full 90, it would have been a hugely consequential rout. But then, well, the tortoise and the hare metaphor come to mind here. Then Hillary implemented Bait Trump Protocol Alpha 1 when she brought up how he got his start with a $14 million loan from his father. She got the details wrong, but it doesn't matter. When you're baiting fish or Trumpzilla, the lure does not have to be real, it just has to be shiny. In fact, getting the bait just slightly wrong makes it even more irresistible, because we all have a natural instinct to correct falsehoods aimed at us, and Trump more than anybody else. So Trump bit the shiny thing, and for the rest of the night, plodding, dull Hillary Clinton, yes, she's the tortoise in this equation, led Trump around the stage like a matador with a red cape. And 4 days later, Trump is still charging around like an enraged bull. At first, I thought Mrs. Clinton's use of Alicia Machado was odd. There are so many Trump victims out there, why use one with such a weird past? But that's what was so brilliant about it. If Machado were a nun, it would be harder for Trump to attack. But Trump thinks he can win this one on the merits, and so he won't let go of it. He didn't learn the lesson of his feud with the Khan family. Khan! The only way to win such fights is to not engage in them at all. In other words, exercise a little self-restraint, a little self-discipline, a little self-control, commodities of which Donald Trump possesses zero. The debate wasn't a disaster, but, well, actually it kind of was, but how he handled the post-debate spin definitely was and continues to be. If Trump could ever stay on one message, if he could be a disciplined candidate, but then he wouldn't be Trump if that were the case, and that's not what his followers wanted. They didn't want a professional politician. They didn't want somebody who could focus because that and be a disciplined candidate, because that'd be boring. And the American voter wants to be entertained, not ably or inspirationally led. So, if Trump had been anybody else but Trump, he'd probably be 10 points ahead by now. But realistically, this is no different from saying that if Trump could control anything metal with his mind, he would be Magneto. Okay, so why in my selfish heart, Goldberg writes, do I want Trump to win? Because that's the only surefire way my opposition to Trump can be vindicated. If he loses every time Hillary Clinton does something awful, which will be a lot, people will say, if Trump were president, this wouldn't be happening, which would be BS. Or, this is all the fault of the Jonah Goldberg class. No, it'll be the fault of Trumplicans. Or, if we had Trump's broad shoulder, if we had Trump's small-fingered leadership, the grain harvest would be historic. Or whatever. Now, such claims would be a variant of Parmenides' fallacy, in which people always assume the road not taken would have avoided any problems. But that won't matter. And that's why I say that in my selfish moments, Goldberg writes, I want him to win. That's not me, folks. I'm not. I don't. I'm not that selfish. I may be selfish in other areas. I'm not selfish in this area. Absolutely not. Contrary to all of this incessant blather that I want Hillary Clinton to win because it will be good for my bottom line, the truth is the best thing that could happen for me personally is for Trump to win and then prove to be the spectacularly awful president that he would be. Indistinguishable from Hillary Clinton. The I told you so's will be delightful. The chortling and pointing and hysterical laughter from the left and the Democrats would be breathtaking. The tears of some of his supporters, delicious. Even delectable, dare I say. Now I say some of his supporters for a reason. Because I think many of the supporters would continue to defend Trump no matter what he did or said as president, and you know that's true. And that's probably the main reason I'm so opposed to him. Tell me where you've heard this before on this channel, ladies and gentlemen. A Trump presidency would destroy conservatism in this country. I've said a lot about the corrupting effect of Trump's candidacy has had on conservatism. But let me try to put it a different way. Trump is an unintentional master of the art of rectal ventriloquism. No, I don't mean he's a champion farter. I mean he talks out of his ass and the words magically start coming out of other people's mouths. It's kind of copophagic. I think that's the term. He says eminent domain is wonderful. That's when the government steals private property. Is wonderful. And suddenly conservatives start saying, yeah, it's wonderful. Who needs the Fifth Amendment? Trump floats a new entitlement for child care, and almost instantaneously, people once opposed to it start bragging about how sensitive they are to the plight of working mothers. Trump says Social Security needs to be more generous. And days later, once proud Tea Partiers, that's right, you heard me say it, are saying the same thing. And the rest of us are left to marvel at how we didn't even see Trump's lips or even cheeks, any of the four of them, move. This is a perfect example of the corrupting effect of populism, which you remember is based entirely on emotion and nothing else, and no wise decision has ever been made in an emotional state of mind, don't forget. But this is a perfect example of the corrupting effect of populism and personality cults. I keep mentioning my favorite line from William Jennings Bryan. The people of Nebraska are for free silver, and I am for free silver. I will look up the arguments later. For many Trumplicans, the rule of the day is Donald Trump is for X, at least for today, and I am for X. I will look up the arguments. Well, nah, they never will, because there are no arguments. Now, I've spoken to countless leading conservatives, including prominent politicians, who tell me that, and Douglas V. Gibbs has said this. I go back. He said it on the air on KMET, Constitution Radio, that once Trump is in the White House, Mitch McConnell, Paul Ryan, Mike Cuck Pence, and all of Trump's wonderful appointees will be able to manage him. Remember, nobody controls Trump? Amazing how Trumplicans have forgotten that. Trump's talk radio and TV supporters will keep him honest and make sure he keeps his promises. Oh, you mean like Sean Hannity? Like him? Oh, he's going to hold Trump's feet to the fire? He can't stop unzipping Trump's fly. And indeed, I think this assertion, this claim is fucking sane, ladies and gentlemen. Now, candidate Trump cannot be managed. Nobody controls Trump, remember? Everyone with any contacts in or around Trump world has heard the stories about how his staff tries to impose discipline on him. The jokes about Kellyanne Conway desperately trying to hide his phone from him to keep him off Twitter are funny because they're true! And she failed last night, grievously. And yet, you're telling me that if Trump wins, despite rejecting all of this advice, and actually takes possession of Air Force One, and when the Marine Guard starts saluting him as the band plays, dun 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 dun, he changed that, by the way. That's not nearly classy enough. Hail to the chief, not nearly classy enough. Probably he'll play the Italian Fascist Party national anthem that is my update theme for him on Hard Starboard Radio, the podcast, blogtalkradio.com/HSR Network. That I'm supposed to believe this staggering narcissist will suddenly become manageable? Seriously? Moreover, throughout his entire business career, he has made a name for himself as a promise breaker, welcher, snake oil salesman, con man, willing to say whatever he needs to in order to close the deal. Sure, this car gets 200 miles to the gallon. Sign the check and you'll see. That is what the art of the deal really means for him. He would get the White House and he'd say to the rest of us looking to cash in his political promises, just try and collect. Too late, suckers! He'd be off to play golf with Chuck Schumer and Nancy Pelosi at that point. See, remember something, Trumplicans. Trump is not a conservative. Neither are any of you. Trump has no conservative instincts, and they're not derived from any serious attachment to ideas or arguments. They stem from his lizard brain machismo and his authoritarian streak. He never talks about liberty or limited government or the United States Constitution unless someone shoves it into his teleprompter. His ideas about economics and public policy are shot through with socialism. He's learned to talk the talk about free market solutions, but he doesn't speak the language. In his heart, he's still the guy who believes single-payer health care works incredibly well. The one advisor we know he listens to is his daughter, Ivanka. The one, the woman he wants to boink. Oh, wow, she weren't my daughter. Hubba, hubba, hubba. And she is certainly no conservative. Does anyone believe he will side with Mike Cuck Pence and against Ivanka in a fight over, say, Planned Parenthood? And more pertinent question is, does anybody believe that Mike Cuck Pence would be arguing against Planned Parenthood within a Trump regime? I sure as hell don't. Now, Hadley Arkes, one of many scholars for Trump, has an interesting argument for why he supports him. Quote, in 1964, the Republicans with Goldwater were blown away, and yet 4 years later, the Republicans came back strongly with Richard Nixon. Remember how I described Donald Trump? If he's any kind of Republican, he's a Rockefeller Republican, and more specifically, Richard Nixon. Here we go. Straight from the mouth, or straight from the ass, of a scholar for Trump. But in those intervening 4 years, the regime itself was changed. The Great Society extended and confirmed the reach of the federal authority until it covered hiring and firing in corporations and even small private colleges. And it extended federal controls over local education. We are faced now with a comparable threat to change the regime yet again. Obama has already sought to govern wide sections of the economy with regulations that bear little connection to any statute that can give the standing of law to these executive orders. He has made a nullity of Congress on the separation of powers. Like Trump would do anything to but double down on that. Note that Arx says Republicans came back strongly with Richard Nixon. Well, first of all, it's a gross exaggeration. If not for the presence of George Wallace as a third-party candidate, Hubert Humphrey would have blown out Richard Nixon in 1968. Remember, Nixon only won 43% of the vote. I wasn't coming back strong by any means. But to the degree that it was a comeback in that, yeah, technically Nixon won by the skin of his nuts, but he did win, it was not a conservative comeback. The Goldwaterites were marginalized, read Conservatives. Nixon didn't roll back the Great Society, he made it bipartisan. Is this starting to sound familiar, Trumplicans? This is my greatest fear of Trump victory. One of them. Save for his anti-communism, Nixon wasn't a conservative. He came from the progressive Rockefeller wing of the GOP. He told reporters that the Buckleyites, i.e. conservatives, were a threat more menacing to the GOP than was the John Birch Society. He believed Ronald Reagan was a know-nothing. He told his aide, John C. Whitaker, there is only one thing as bad as a far-left liberal, and that's a damn right-wing conservative. Nixon created the Environmental Protection Agency. Nixon took us off the gold standard. Nixon created the Occupational Safety and Health Administration and all those other alphabet soup regulatory agencies. Nixon implemented wage and price controls. Nixon said, we're all Keynesians, i.e. socialists now. Nixon launched the first affirmative action programs, reverse discrimination against whites. Whites? Trump's core supporters? Nixon proposed a health care program that was downright Obamacare-esque. Nixon, ladies and gentlemen. From everything we know, Trump is a Nixonian liberal without a fraction of Nixon's policy chops. A know-nothing, shall we say? Trump has surrounded himself with Nixon retreads like Manafort and Stone and ripped off Nixon's entire rhetorical playbook from the silent majority on down. In my heart, I truly believe he would trade Supreme Court appointments for a massive infrastructure program. The one thing we know about Trump is that he likes to build stuff and put his name on it. If Chuck Schumer and Nancy Pelosi, who already won a massive infrastructure program, or another one, told him, hey, meet us halfway on the judges and we'll deliver the votes you need, Trump would do it in a heartbeat, and every last one of you Trumplicans knows it. Throwing the conservatives under the bus at the same time, which would please both sides. And here's the important point, taking an enormous number of Republicans with him. Let me remind you of something, Trumplicans. What enabled the Republicans to make such a huge comeback in the 2010 midterms? One factor above everything else. Not a single Republican vote for Obamacare. Not one. Now, picture Donald Trump having been president at that time. there would have been all kinds of Republican votes for Obama, or for the equivalent of Obamacare, for Trump care. And you know why? Tribalism, partisan loyalty, party loyalty. Even though it would have been antithetical to everything the Republican Party, well, now used to stand for. That's why when you have an enemy in your midst who hostilely takes over your party, you have to oppose them. You have to keep and police your own house first. How many times have Tea Partiers said that over the past, well, 3, 4, 5, 6 years, however long it's been, since the Tea Party era? For the past 7 years. How many times have Tea Partiers said that over the past 7 years? We're going to police our own party first. Well, I guess those bastards fell down on the job, didn't they? What's that expression? Awake at the lectern and asleep at the switch. Just look at the issues of trade, entitlements, child care, and gun rights in the form of Trump's capitulation on the terror watch list. Look at all the formerly true conservative types, not never Trumpers, but the ones who held them out as being themselves out as being tidy righties and then sold out to Trump, who have gamely gone along with Trump so far. If anybody else had said any of those things, they would have been tearing that person a new you-know-what. But Trump says it, even though he's going to contradict himself next Tuesday. And they all know it. And next Tuesday they'll be saying, "Yeah! We don't need a terrorist watch list. Yeah!" I thought we had enough of this crap for 8 years with Barack Obama, now imported into the GOP itself. Trumplicans didn't oppose Obama on principle. They opposed him because he was a Democrat. But get a false messiah of their own, that's what Trumplicans wanted, a false messiah of their own. An Obama of their own. In Cheeto Jesus, they got what they wanted. Remember that expression, be careful what you wish for, you may get it. But here's the point. Do you honestly think that most Republicans would break with a President Trump on anything? Trump won't crush the administrative state. He will be rolled by the bureaucrats. That's what the heads of bureaucracies do in our system. They don't run the agencies. They spin up and co-opt politicians. That's why you need a conservative president who knows things. And there were several genuinely GOP candidates in the Republican field in 2016, like Scott Walker, like Rick Perry, like Bobby Jindal, like Ted Cruz, like Marco Rubio, who fit that description. But no, the GOP nominating electorate wanted to be entertained, not led, or not fronted by anybody who would actually do what they had been demanding the GOP establishment do for the past 7 years. Stick to their principles. Instead, Trumplicans threw their principles overboard themselves and sold out to Trump. Now, I'm not one to overindulge in self-pity, but I do sometimes feel like a therapist should be asking me, show me on the doll where 2016 touched you. But among the most annoying and asinine arguments, quote-unquote, accusations, really, hurled at me 100 times a day is that if I'm against Trump, I'm for Hillary. This is bullshit on stilts, atop a cloud. I can't stand Hillary Clinton. Back when Trump was writing her checks and inviting her to his wedding, I was opposing her and her familial tongue with everything I had. Jonah Goldberg wrote liberal fascism with her in mind. The hardcover subtitle reference to the politics of meaning was a direct shot at her new agey, soft totalitarian nanny stateism. Or nanny statism, that's right. I will give the first person who can find a single pro-Hillary column or paragraph I've ever written or said in any podcast a lifetime subscription to National Review. I think she will make a terrible president, in the vein of Jimmy Carter, not Barack Obama, and will be bad for America. Nobody disputes that. If any of the other 16 candidates had won the nomination, many of whom I cannot stand, I would be out there screaming expletives at any Republican who thought Hillary was a better choice. Why? Because if nothing else can be said for all of the other 16 candidates, at least they're all Republicans. Donald Trump is not. And even with my adamantine opposition to Trump, I still cannot imagine endorsing Hillary Clinton, even though liberals are now insisting I must almost as much as conservatives claim I can say. Even though liberals are now insisting I must almost as much as conservatives claim I have, because I know she will be horrible and she stands for things I reject with every fiber of my political soul. But here's the thing. Conservatives know, and this is the point that I've been making repeatedly, conservatives know how to oppose Mrs. Clinton, who will come into office the most damaged and unpopular president in American history, having fulfilled her mandate to not be Trump on day one. Remember, Jimmy Carter, not Barack Obama. But it's already very clear that Republicans do not know how to oppose Trump. His hostile takeover of the Republican Party demonstrates that. Boy, Jasmius Echo Syndrome is all over this G-file, folks. So do the otherworldly descriptions of Trump that his more intellectual supporters conjure from thin air or from their asses. If he becomes president, the Republican Party will no longer be even notionally conservative. America can survive 4 years of Hillary Clinton, though those 4 years will be bad. Very bad. But America cannot survive if both parties reject the principles of limited government and constitutionalism, Doug, which would be the result of a successful Trump presidency, or Trumpenancy, or even most scenarios in which he's a failed president. The demise won't be instantaneous, but gradual, as a new bipartisan consensus forms between a right-wing statist party and a left-wing statist party, which is to say, a left-wing statist party and a left-wing statist party. The body-snatched Republicans will become ever more serviceable dummies for the master of rectal ventriloquism. Tribalism, ladies and gentlemen, partisan tribalism. Principled conservatives won't vanish, though some trolls keep telling me we'll all be hung or hanged, gassed, or killed by the coming mobs. Yeah, bring it on. Bring it on, bitches. Rather, we will become increasingly irrelevant, cast into the same peanut gallery as our libertarian cousins. But we would be able to say, I told you so, which, in Jonah Goldberg's selfish moments, is a great temptation. Though not for me, because I can't gain or derive any satisfaction from the destruction of my country, the destruction of my party, and the destruction of everything I ever believed in by people I considered friends, allies, and co-ideologists.